right. Well, happy Black History Month to all of you joining us today. As you can see, we have an amazing group of women that represent ACW here in the channel. And so I'm really excited to have this conversation. This conversation is going to be centered around the role that Black organizations such as HBCUs or historically Black colleges and universities, Jack and Jill, the Divine Nine, and others have played in shaping the African-American community and setting the stage for future progress. Our panel of accomplished women will offer their unique perspectives on the legacy and ongoing impact of these important organizations. I'm Kelli McMillan, Director of Global Partners over at Five9, also founder of Exposure, Inclusion, and Diversity Council, and DE&I Chair at ACW. And my fun fact is I apparently like to wear many hats. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our panelists. And Rashel, I'd like to start with you.
Thank you. So excited to be here today. Well, let's see. So I am the leader of channel operations and strategy at Verizon. One of the fun facts that I'll share is that I am addicted to really nice purses.
I love that. Okay, what's your favorite brand?
I like Louis. That's my favorite right now.
Okay. I'm here for it. Yeah, especially when you can find a unique one. So yeah.
Yes. Yes. I have a limited edition that I'm really proud of. That yeah. So every time I go out, people say, I don't see that often. It's like, well, that's my goal. I like to be unique.
Okay. I love it. Awesome. Staci?
Sure. I'm Staci Corbett. I'm the Senior Manager of Channel Marketing at Fusion Connect. So two things. Number one, just kind of piggybacking off of what Rashel said, I do not own a purse. It makes my mother want to vomit. I hate purses. Is that a fun fact or a disgusting fact? I don't know. But a fun fact about me is that while I'm a marketer by day, I moonlight as a math teacher.
Nice. I love that. What are you teaching and who are you teaching?
I primarily teach college math. So right now the math class I'm teaching is called dynamic algebra. Think high school, algebra 1, algebra 2, that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. You don't want to know how many times I had to take math in undergrad. So yeah, but my kids are like full on really great about it. But I'm like, mommy, she had to get to that point in her life where she could do it. So that's really dope. I love that you moonlight as a math teacher. And last but not least, Miss Mayka, tell us a little bit about you.
Yes. So my name is Mayka Rosales-Peterson. I am the Senior Manager of Partner Marketing at Intelisys. I serve on the board for ACW, and I also serve on the board for Exposure. And a fun fact about me is I was Miss Panama USA in 2011. So I represented all the Panamanians in the United States for the full year in the small little country of Panama. So that's really
sweet.
Fun fact.
I love that. And I you know what else I love about that? And because I know you were friends, just in that that culture and your culture of who you are, it bleeds into everything that you do. And I think it makes you stronger, right? Like you lean wholeheartedly into it.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I'm proud of who I am, proud of being an Afro-Latina, a Black woman in this space. So yeah, I'm excited about this conversation. It's going to be really good.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a really amazing segue, right? We're going to transition into finding your tribe. There is this African proverb that we've all likely heard at some point growing up, that it takes a village to raise a child. So as we start this first question, we're going to talk a little bit about like how we get ready as we transition from high school into undergrad. And we all know kind of what those butterflies felt like when we were trying to figure out which which college or university to go to. And so, Rashel, I wanted to start with you. How did you choose the university that you were go to, and why did you choose an HBCU?
So certainly. So for me, I grew up in upstate New York, and I wanted to go to an HBCU because I wanted to be around other like-minded people who look like me. Throughout my entire life, even now, I would say to some degree, it was always that I talked a certain way, and I, like certain interests, and I may be unique. And the thing about an HBCU is that I realized I wasn't unique. I'm not unique. I am just one of many African Americans that have interest in things like books or talk a certain way, because that's really how you should talk when you're in a corporate environment, right? And so I didn't feel like I was an outsider anymore. So I really wanted to have that experience, to network, also the culture, going to something as simple as a band performance, or going to see an HBCU band. If you've never experienced it, I would highly recommend it, because the way that the bands are was not like other schools that I had seen before. And just to be able to be me, 100% me, and bring all of that culture together is really special. So those are all just some of the reasons that I wanted to go to HBCU.
I love that. And I think, again, as we talk about the culture and understanding the impact of being in an environment where you see yourself more over and over and over, you feel comfortable, right? And then you're also learning at the same time. Staci, tell us a little bit about your undergrad experience.
Yeah, so mine is a little interesting, right? Because I grew up in Atlanta. So my whole world was Black. Like, let me just be honest, right? I went to a Black elementary school. Even I went to a private school, but it was still all Black. And I went to a Black public school. And throughout high school, I went to summer programs down at the AUC. For folks that don't know, that's like it's a center of 6 HBCUs, right? Well, at the time it was 6 HBCUs. So I didn't even apply to any universities that weren't HBCUs. Also, I have multiple people in my family that are alumni of specifically Spelman. So it was almost a next step. It was a legacy that was kind of built in my family. And so when I suggested that I was going to another HBCU, they were like, seriously, that's not going to happen, right? But when I got there, to Rashel's point, there's just such a sense of community and belonging. But and I might be getting a little ahead of myself, but even in that community, you still have to find your tribe there, right? So one thing that I found when I went to Spelman that was very interesting was everybody there was brilliant. There was a whole school of brilliant Black girls. And I was like, oh crap, wait a minute. Am I smart enough to be here? So you still have to carve out your space and find your lane, even in a community that feels super comfortable for you.
I love that. And I totally identify with that as well. I grew up in Houston, and I actually myself and my family moved back here a few years ago. But growing up in Houston, Texas Southern University, which for the longest time was one of the largest HBCUs in the country, it's one of the only ones that are public. A lot of the HBCUs are private. And so that was a no-brainer for us too. I started at University of Houston, of course, across the street, because I was like, I'm going to do something different. And then I went over to Texas Southern, and I mean, the amount of impact that it had on who I am now, how I maneuver in this space, and how I create space for others is because others created space for me. Poli-sci major school, Barbara Jordan, Mayka Leland School of Political Science, right? And so like you get into these spaces and you see how much history came before you, kind of to your point, Staci, you just have to rise to the occasion. And so Mayka, I know that you did not attend an HBCU. However, you today professionally are a part of one of the most impactful national organizations, Jack and Jill. Tell us how you came to learn about that organization and why it's such an integral part of your family.
Yeah, and it's an interesting perspective from my end, because as an Afro-Latina with 2 immigrant parents that came here, I didn't even know what HBCU was, right? Even though I'm physically Black, culturally, I didn't know what it was, right? Coming into Jack and Jill has helped me a ton. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. It was very diverse. And then my husband's career took us out to the middle of nowhere, Ohio, where we're the only ones, right? My son is the only Black child in his private school, right? And for me, it was just trying to find a community that my son can feel like he's part of, not feel different. And Jack and Jill definitely is that for me, in a place where, we don't see ourselves at all, right? It gave us a community where it teaches our children about Black culture, about who they are, about how to stand up for yourself, how to not feel different being the only one. So I'm really appreciative for my Jack and Jill mothers here in Toledo chapter. Huge shout out to you guys, but it's a wonderful, amazing organization. And I'm so lucky to have found it.
I love that. Yeah, it is certainly, I just can't say enough. I've also lived in multiple places in the country. And one of the things that I was a part of was Black Girls Run. So I run. And so one of the chapters was when I lived in DC, I found a chapter. When I lived in Seattle, there was a really small chapter, but I found one. When I was in the Bay Area, I had to drive down to Oakland. So to your point, you extend, your reach when you're looking for that. And I think it's really important. So I want to transition a little bit to the importance of extending your reach and finding your tribe in your journey and your careers. Black employees make up 1/10 of the entire tech industry for which we're a part of, tech and telecommunications. And is less than 8% of the leadership within these organizations. So as we're talking about the diversity crisis almost within tech and technology spaces, I think it's also important to understand why it's so impactful for us to find these organizations. Rashel, I know that you are super integral in the organization, your ERGs within your organization. Can you tell us a little bit of why that impact is so what you've done to create impact there?
Yeah, so thank you. I would say I look at it as, what are you doing internally for where you work? And then how are you helping the community? And are there ways that you can tie those together? So as an example, at Verizon, we have lots of ERGs. For example, Bold is one that caters to the African-American community. And, always trying to find things, whether it's, how do we help with the digital divide, as an example? When you look at the impact that the pandemic had with people having access to something as simple as high-speed internet, right? I'll tell you, in my family, we struggle a little bit with, we thought we had the right bandwidth and we have means, right? And then everyone at home at the same time is like, oh my goodness, what do we do? So then you start to think about, well, what would happen if someone didn't have that? Like, how are we giving out hotspots? How are we finding those communities? How are we being a voice? All the way to just being able to give just mentoring or coaching to students that are trying to figure out what they want to do, or they need help with homework. So those are just some examples. And then when I look at things that I do with my sorority, it's very similar in trying to find mentorship opportunities. How do we really think about where do we have the most impact? And then how do we be a voice, right, and an advocate to the community leaders, and then bringing that back into the corporate world to make sure that we're whether it's finding funding or just helping bridge the gap between going from school to an education and then getting a job full time and doing work with that.
Rashel, I love how you say that. And you guys are going to hear me say I love a lot, because I do. It's a part of the fabric of the makeup and who I am. And I feel like who all of these women are on this panel. So sorry, but not sorry. But
be sorry. You should be sorry for love.
I know. I think I'm just happy. And no, I do appreciate that impact, because I think that it's a lot. Earlier when we started this conversation, I shared how many hats that I wear. I know that you women wear so many different hats, and it's almost like this, I don't want to say it's on your shoulders, but it's in your heart. It's just a passion about who you are, and you want to bring others with you. So to hear you talk about the things that the impact on, really visually seeing the impact on those that have less than us, not being able to have access to the right resources to be successful, can really steer your journey in a way that can make it very challenging to where it can almost be breaking. But with that being said, so I appreciate and applaud the work that you're doing at Verizon, but I can't not mention, I cannot touch on the mention of the Divine Nine. So you have to tell us a little bit about what sorority you're repping, and before we move over to the other ladies.
Are there more than one sorority? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I have nothing but love for all of the Divine Nine. So I represent Delta Sigma Theta.
Oh, okay. Yes, ma'am. Well, okay, yes. So anyway, with that being said, some of us did not go in undergrad, and some of us are trying to make some grad decisions right now in life. So we'll see. Staci, are you a part of the Divine Nine?
I am not.
No. Okay. All right. Well, to all of those that are out there, the Divine Nine are a list or a group of sororities and fraternities who were established in the early 1900s, with actually Alpha Kappa Alpha being one of the first ones, Delta Sigma Theta, Kappa Alpha Psi, all the others. And don't get your feelings hurt if I didn't call you out. We just don't have time for that. But it is an organization, and every last one of those organizations have a moniker. They have a mission to sow back into the community, right? You're educated, you've had the access to resources, and so now it's literally the spirit of Sankofa. Like, you bring somebody up, and you bring somebody with you, or you sow your time into the community. So a lot of the things, especially here in Houston, and I'm sure in all of our backgrounds in our communities, there are literally places where, the Deltas did this, or the Kappas did this, or the Omegas did that, in order to reinforce our communities. So as we transition, Staci, tell us a little bit about how, your experience growing up in Atlanta, attending Spelman, has impacted your career and your journey.
Oh gosh. Oh, Spelman. Spelman has my heart, right? So like, if you guys look at me on LinkedIn, 9 times out of 10, I'm talking about Spelman and nothing else. But it's so interesting because so at Spelman, I definitely started Spelman not knowing anything about what I wanted to do with my life. I probably graduated somewhere close to that as well, but the time there kind of exposed me to the possibilities, right? And while I may not have taken advantage of those opportunities as soon as my parents wanted me to, at least I had that level of exposure. I hadn't seen so many Black folks talk about grad school or medical school or technology spaces, right? And so it definitely gave me that. But I think the biggest impact that it had on me was the responsibility that it placed upon us to get back in the community. And so even throughout college, I tutored all the way throughout college, not college students, but elementary kids, because the thing about most HBCUs, at least the ones that I've been to, the schools are super great, but the neighborhoods around them, maybe not so much. And so we would spend a lot of time going out to those schools and bringing them over to the college and saying, hey, look, this could be you, this could be your next step. And so even now, a lot of what I do outside of work is I volunteer with the PTA, much to my husband's chagrin. I teach math. I tutor my brother's football team in math so that they're not only great athletes, but they're also scholars as well. Because he has 200 football players, but like 3 of them are going to the NFL. Let's be clear, right? So what else are you going to do? Like, you still have to be a student. You got to, even if you get a scholarship to, West Decatur College, whatever, right? Use that degree to then prepare you for the next step. So I spent a significant amount of time out specifically with youth and just making sure that they're aware of opportunities that they might not have known about. At things as simple as working remotely. The kids at my daughter's school are like, oh my gosh, you work from home. Not so much now, but like 3 years ago, you're like, all the time you're at home and you're working? I'm like, yeah. But I can remember being her age, and if someone's parent had told me they worked remotely, like, it would blow my mind, right? So just making sure that they're aware and they know what is possible.
Yeah, the exposure to things really does guide who you are. And now those young people who are like just finding out that you can work from home, that just amplified something in their heads, that as they move forward, then they know maybe I'm not going to ever have to go into an office, or I don't ever need to go into a building. I can do follow my dreams from my house, right? And be closer to my family. Mayka, we know the amazing work that you're doing over at Intelisys with your partner program. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and why you're so passionate about that work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at Intelisys, we have many ERGs that are focused to help women, people of color, but more specifically in the channel, we're building this program that no other TSD is doing at the moment, specifically made for partners of color. So in the program, we're giving BIPOC partners, because there's not a lot in our channel, obviously, resources, opportunities, money, access to different suppliers and their programs to help elevate their businesses even further, which is a gap that, a small group of us noticed here at Intelisys that we needed to fill. So I'm super excited to be part of those efforts and being able to raise awareness in our channel in a bigger capacity, that we need to be able to serve different partners that obviously need the help. So we should be launching that this year. I know Kelli and 5'9" has been part of that conversation a little bit. So we're just really humbled at the opportunity that we have to do that here at Intelisys. So more to come with that.
Yeah, and I here's the thing that I love about that is that all of you are contributing in a way that is impactful to you. Back in 2020, I'm gonna go back a little bit. In 2020, Exposure was founded in 2019 as a business resource group to help other people get into tech. And with obviously a lens around diversity, equity, inclusion, because you have to create a safe space for us to come into this space. Otherwise, it's no different than maybe what our parents or, others in corporate spaces have dealt with in the past, right? It can be a little polarizing. So at the beginning of 2020, when literally the world stopped and everything was happening, we had to pivot really quickly and address some social issues. With that being said, that I remember telling a group on a similar panel as we were talking that there are so many challenges. Staci, you talked about education. Rashel, you talked about access. Mayka, you talked about access to resources and monetary, right? Rashel, you talked about access to connectivity, right? Literally, our whole world is on the internet. And Staci, you talked about just the basics of making sure our children have the appropriate educations. And if they do need some help, somebody is there to mentor them and tutor them so that they can keep moving forward and not just athletically. We hadn't even talked about the healthcare ramifications of being Black in this country. We haven't talked about legal and all these other things. So I like to tell people, find your lane and hunker down and get into it, because we're going to be here for a while. If we want to see a change and a difference for our littles and those that come behind us, then we have to be a part of that change, right? We have to create the change that we want to see. So as we round out this conversation, I have one last question. What can people do to promote DE&I, and what are some things that to be most impactful to the organizations that either you're a part of, or especially from a corporate perspective? What are some of those things? What's the one thing that you would leave our listeners with that they can do today? Let's start with Mayka.
Yeah, I would say to not be afraid to call something out. DE&I is very important. And not let those conversations die, because we've seen, in the last few years, the DE&I conversation kind of wane out a little bit, but it's still very much important. And, when you can use your voice, when you can make a difference, speak. And when you're able to lift someone else up, do it.
I love it. Staci?
I think that So I've worked for a couple of organizations, some that really stress DE&I and some that don't so much. I think that one of the struggles that organizations have is really understanding what it is. Like, diversity means so many different things to so many different people. And I've seen a significant focus on gender diversity, but there are so many other avenues that need to be focused on. At the top of that list, obviously, is cultural diversity, right? But really taking the time to understand what and why it's important, and how not only it can benefit the employees, but then how that bubbles over and helps the corporation as well.
Yeah, that's really good. Rashel?
Yes, I think what everyone said is so true. What I would just leave everybody with is, one is, you said it earlier, Kelli, about finding your lane. I think it's knowing that everyone has a voice, everyone has a gift. And if you could just figure out, how do you help educate people around something that you're really, that needs to be said. As an example, we have courageous conversations here where they're uncomfortable to talk about things, whether it's prison sentences or things that you wouldn't naturally have in a corporate environment. But be the voice to say, well, let me educate on why this matters, and then listen. And how do you take action? Because a lot of times we listen and we talk, but then what are you going to do about it? So putting that up front and saying, here are some things and here are resources that maybe we can connect the dots that can help. And if it's not you to do it, maybe it's someone else, or here's an opportunity that, is out there. And then these are some things that we can work together to try to figure out. I find that when all of that comes together and people know that it's okay, that diversity and inclusion and those conversations come back to the top. And then there's really an action plan around how do we make a difference.
And what I hear from all of you is that it's going to take all of us to do this work. It's going to take all of us to lean in, to use our voice, as Mayka shared earlier, and to ensure that we leave a legacy that makes us, like Staci said earlier, you have to rise to the occasion. Those that come behind us, there's going to be other work that we miss. There's going to be things that maybe we're setting the foundation for right now. We're adding to that foundation. And so my ask is that, to your point, Rashel, we have an action plan. We figure out how we make the diversity, the equity, the inclusion, and the allyship all a part of the conversation in an ecosystem to where they support each other and they're not segregated out. And I think that we'll get to a better experience in this space a lot quicker. So with that being said, I just want to say thank you so much for this conversation. Conversations like this on the top of the week are really going to help me get through the week, and I hope it does the same for you. And so thank you to my amazing panelists. Have a good rest of your day.